We're going to go ahead and move on. So we just added an additional job to somebody in Workday. What we're going to talk about now, if you can read that, is compensation changes versus job changes. So which process would you use to do a pay change? Compensation changes in Workday, if you're just doing a compensation change, there are no other changes other than pay. You would either use request compensation change, manage period activity pay, or request a one-time payment. If you're doing something other to their job, so they're getting a promotion, there's a grade level increase, there's a reduction in responsibility that might result in the compensation change, those are all falling under the change job category. So if it's just a pay change, you use request comp, manage period activity pay, or request one-time payment.
Compensation change, request one-time payment, is that where you would do a supplemental compensation?
It depends on the supplemental compensation. But yes, what type of supplemental compensation?
So like they did a special, they taught a class that was unusual or something.
That would probably be under managed period activity pay, and you would do an additional activity, and then you would pay them that supplemental pay through managed period activity pay.
Okay. I don't know, this is a student contract.
A one-time payment is more like a bonus. Yes.
So if they, like an adjunct faculty member, mentor somebody for a semester, and we give them like $500 bonus, and we're doing that with us, we're wondering would that get yesterday?
Bonus is more divided out. Bonus, and we're gonna look at managed period activity pay and request compensation change. If we have time, we can show you the request one-time payment. But request one-time payment, we'll talk about the difference between that and period activity pay, because those are where your questions are. All right. Other job changes that could happen. So if you want to change a job, you want to do a contract renewal, a lateral move, location change, their physical location is changing, or they're moving to a new manager, those fall under job change categories. And that would be, it could be with or without a comp change. But right now we're going to focus on compensation changes. So for a comp, there's a compensation grade, which is a range for a particular job profile. There's a specific compensation range held within a grade. You have a salary, an hourly rate, and then you can also have an allowance. Now, allowances are only available for staff or full-time faculty. You cannot give somebody else, you can't give a student an allowance. You cannot give an adjunct faculty an allowance. It's only for full-time faculty and staff. You also cannot have people in the system with mixed pay rates. So if they're salaried, they need to be salaried for their positions. If they're hourly, they need to be hourly for their positions. They cannot have both pay rates. All right, so we're going to look at requesting a compensation change. So we're not changing anything up to this job other than the pay. So you're going to use request compensation change again when you want to make a compensation change to an hourly or salaried employee, and they are not paid through period activity pay. They're not in continuing education. They're not on a contract. They're not adjunct faculty. If they're hourly or salary, you're going to use the request compensation change process. To do that, you would select the request compensation change business process. You could either type that into the search bar, or like I'm going to ask you to do today, navigate to that worker's profile, hover over compensation under actions, and select request compensation change. Once you have an employee filled out here, Workday is going to change that that prompt box to look like the one over here. Because what it's going to do is it's going to default your compensation change to the next period pay, or the next pay period, and it will update that date for you. You can override it, but you can't do both. You can't have the use next pay period and the effective date not match. So if you change the effective date, you can't select use next pay period. There are certain compensation change reasons in Workday. So when you're requesting a comp change, you do have to select a reason for that comp change. For faculty, you have quite a few different reasons. It could be an allowance plan, it could be a buyback, could be faculty contract renewal, a leadership change. So there are a couple of different reasons for faculty that you can select when you're making a compensation change. Compensation change for staff, you can change their allowance, or you can do an in-grade increase. And then for students, you could do a demotion, a reduction in responsibility. Maybe there's a merit increase. There's also a merit cycle, and then also promotion. You could promote them and make that change in Workday. If you're promoting somebody and you're changing that from like a student number 1 to a student number 2, that does result in a comp change or could, but you don't want to use comp change. You want to use change job because you're actually changing their job. The other caveat to compensation is if you are changing somebody from hourly to salary, you need to go through change job. Don't do that for request compensation change. Yes.
Staff always defined as a non-student.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So compensation changes between hourly and salary should always be initiated as a change job process, not a compensation change. Okay. Let's skip over it. Okay, so let's take a look at this. All right, so I'm in as Harper again, and I'm gonna make a compensation change for a worker, and we are going to increase Captain America's pay. Again, I can search for request compensation change right here and select the task if I wanted to do it that way, but we don't want to do it that way. We're going to find Captain America, and we are going to increase his pay. So I have compensation here. I can see compensation information for Captain America. I'm going to take action though. I'm going to change his compensation. So I'm going to click actions. I'm going to come down here to compensation. I'm not going to click on compensation. I'm going to hover over it, and I'm going to click on request compensation change. I can see the effective date is the start of the next pay period. If I change this, I want to make his comp change today, it automatically unchecks that box. If I try to do both, it changes the date back. It won't let you do that. We're going to use next pay period, that's fine. This should look similar to you because when you added a job, you did have to go through the proposed compensation hire, right? You had to tell Workday how much you were going to pay somebody for that additional job. There's just a few other steps with propose or request compensation change. I have to select my reason. So those were the things that we talked about. Faculty have quite a few different compensation reasons. Students have a few, staff a few. This is a staff, so I'm going to select one of these. I'm going to select the in-grade increase. I can see he's currently being paid $16 hourly. Here's his comp package information. He's non-exempt. He's got the general compensation package, and here is the compensation range associated for his position. I'm going to come down here to hourly because remember, we do not want to change somebody from hourly to salary in this process. If we're doing that, we use change job. I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to enter in a new amount. I have to stay within this range. Workday will throw you an alert if you try to go outside of that range. So we're going to update his pay to $18 an hour. I can also do a percentage change. If I knew how much I just wanted to increase his salary by 3%, I could enter in the 3% here, and it will change the amount for me. Here's merit information. Yep.
Sorry, I did put in a student's name for going to do this. Someone who's a student for me now, but evidently wasn't when the tenant was created.
Mm-hmm.
So mine looks a little bit different.
So you might not
I need
have
to find
access
it.
to change as much because of,
But it's not showing me a pay rate or anything, but it is showing me her pay. Are we going to have that when this goes live? Because I do have faculty members who say they already have a job with electrical engineering. You have a way of seeing how much they're getting paid.
I'm not sure on if you can see, I have to look at what you would be able to see. And I don't know where that student is and where it falls, or how the security is set up. So I have to look into that.
Okay, that's fine. And you don't have to worry about it.
But you might be able to. If you can now, there's a good chance you can later. All right, so we've updated from to 18. It tells me what it was. It was $16, so that's a $2 increase. I have the merit information. Here's if I needed to, the compensation change, if that was to add an allowance, this is where I would do that. I could enter in a comment or an attachment, and I'll hit submit. And that has now been routed to the manager for. All right. So we'll have you guys go ahead and request a compensation change for somebody.